Americans see this?
Well, I'm sort of shocked about how much attention this story has gotten, Judge, frankly. I mean, I read the article and I said, gee, there's nothing there. They had one page of one of his tax returns from, 15, 20 years ago, saying that he had a large $900 million loss on some of his business operations. Now, look, every farmer watching the show, every rancher, every small businessman and woman knows that when you have a loss, you are allowed under federal tax law to carry that forward, Judge, and you can use that to offset against the profits that you make in future years. It's a hallmark of our current tax system. The New York Times article makes it seem like it's some kind of scandal that Donald Trump had this 1 year of loss, and then they have only insinuation, and they kind of imply that he didn't pay any taxes, but they have no idea. They don't have. Thank goodness they don't have his tax returns.
The Trump campaign neither confirmed nor denied, right, Steve?
Right. Well, but look, Donald Trump has not released his tax returns, rightly or wrongly. I happen to think it's nobody else's business.
Let me ask
but
you
there's
something.
no law. There's no law that says he has to do that.
All right. 46% of Americans say, he probably should release his tax returns, and 52% think it's no big deal.
Yeah.
Does this change the public perception of the tax returns? And, at the end of the day, will it change things?
Let me give you the best reason why Donald Trump, I think, would be foolish to release his tax returns. By the way, I've never talked about this with him, so I'm not making that.
Thinks he should.
But
go ahead.
Here's the most important reason. The left is obsessing about all of these issues that have nothing, the Miss Universe, this tax return story, because Hillary Clinton doesn't want to talk about the issues of the day. She doesn't want to talk about the economy. She doesn't want to talk about jobs. She doesn't want to talk about law and order. She doesn't want to talk terrorism.
Steve, Donald Trump is given them the ability to not focus on that by talking about Miss Universe.
That's right. He's got to be more disciplined, no question about it. But let me go back to your issue about whether there was a crime perpetrated here. There was a crime perpetrated. You know who it was,
Well,
Judge?
I'm going to get to that. Hold on. I'm going to get to that.
That was the person who released these.
It appears what Donald did was legal, and even the New York Times admits that. But I want to refer you now to the federal code, which makes it clear. It's USC 7213.
Yep.
It's unlawful for any person to whom any return or information is disclosed in a manner unauthorized by this title, willfully to print or publish in any manner not provided by law. And this is a felony. So is the New York Times guilty of a felony?
They could be. Now, you know the law a lot better than I do. I mean, I'm a tax policy guy, not a tax attorney. But I will say this, it wouldn't be surprising if this was somebody at the IRS. We know that the IRS has been so politicized under Barack Obama. We've seen what's happened with the way they persecuted conservative organizations. So I think this may have been someone within the IRS under Obama who leaked this information.
Let me get to this question.
Right.
The New York Times, a couple of years ago, when they had information that went against their liberal bent as it related to climate change, they actually said, since the documents are acquired illegally and were never intended for the public eye, they won't be posted in the New York Times. And isn't the New York Times showing that its bias is so obvious that it's reported that one of them said, we're willing to be prosecuted to get this out?
There's no question about it. Look, the New York Times 3 or 4 weeks ago actually admitted that they are no longer going to be impartial. They feel that Donald Trump is such a tyrant and so bad for America that they don't even pretend to be impartial here. And I love that story you just dug up, Judge, because it shows how hypocritical they are. A number of years ago, they said, well, we can't publish this because this was obtained illegally. They obtained this IRS document from Donald Trump's IRS records illegally, and they publish it. By the way, there's another point here. Conservatives out there who are watching this show, stop getting the New York Times. Stop paying these people. This has become such a liberal. They are no longer impartial.
Thanks for being with us, Steve Moore.
Okay.
Take care. All right. Joining me now with more reaction to this developing story, GOPAC chairman and Republican strategist David Avella and political commentator Danielle McLaughlin. All right, guys, what do you think? Number one, does this story matter to the public? And number two, did the New York Times commit a crime? I'll start with you, Danielle.
There's no evidence that the New York Times committed a crime.
I just read the statute to you. It's unlawful for any person to disclose information unauthorized regarding tax returns, and it's a felony.
Right, and as you know, he
didn't give them permission.
He did not give them permission. There's probably a statute of limitations issue here. And I can't speak for the New York Times, but I'm not convinced that there's a crime here.
Okay, Danielle, statute of limitations has nothing to do with it. They just released the information. Are you saying that they've had this for years, since 1995?
No, absolutely not, Judge. This was apparently given anonymously to the New York Times, as you know.
Right, and they said they just got it, so there's no statute of limitations.
Well, apparently postscript from the Trump Towers. We'll see how that checks out.
David, first, is there a problem here for ordinary Americans, and what do you think of what the Times did?
This won't change one undecided voter's opinion. And if this is the October surprise by the Clinton campaign, we've lowered the standards on what a surprise is. There's no new information here. Donald Trump has paid his taxes. Hillary Clinton's campaign says that. The person who has committed the crime here is the anonymous person who turned it over to the New York Times. Now, you can debate whether the New York Times is complicit in this, but the person who committed the crime isn't Donald Trump for the way he paid his taxes. The person is that turned him over to the New York Times.
Right. And then there's also a question as to whether or not in publishing it, the Times is responsible. But Danielle, what are we saying here? Donald Trump was a businessman. He is allowed to take these offsets, net operating loss offsets. I mean, should he have said to the federal government, I want to pay you money, even though I don't owe you money, I want to pay you money? I mean, that's stupid, isn't it?
I think there's a difference between what is legal and what is moral. And I think American voters want to see a leader that has carried their own water. If you're going to walk the talk, you should talk the talk. Sure, he took a huge business loss, and he did not pay, it appears he didn't pay taxes for 20-odd years.
How do you know that?
Well, I'm saying there's an appearance, and many tax specialists have said there's a reason that he's not
releasing
releasing
But no one's seen anything other than a page from the 95 return.
Right, and tax specialists, and I'm not one, have said 20 years you can basically not pay the tax because you've taken such a huge loss.
Right, you can move it forward.
Right.
David?
Tax accountants make a living off making sure Americans pay what they need to pay, but get the maximum benefits to what the current tax code says. Let me also remind everybody, Judge, Americans vote with their pockets. And that's why Americans leave high-income tax states and move to low-income tax states. It's why states like Connecticut lose population and states like Tennessee pick up population because they don't have an income tax. Americans don't have a problem with using the tax system to their advantage.
All right, David, I want to get to another question. And during the debate, one of the things that Hillary Clinton said, all of you watching tonight, to know that he's paid nothing in federal taxes because the only years anyone has ever seen were a couple of years, she was referring to 78 and 79 when he was trying to get a casino license. There's something in me that tells me she knew this was coming to the New York Times, and that's why she bumped it up in the debate. Do you think she knew, Danielle?
I don't think she knew. I don't think she knew at all. I mean, I don't think she's probably surprised because most people who are watching a candidate who gave Mitt Romney a very hard time about his tax returns, who gave President Obama a huge amount of trouble for paying only 20% of taxes in his 2008 tax return. You know, he has put this, when he's been in the peanut gallery from the sidelines, he's been throwing shells and he's been giving people who are running for president a huge amount of trouble, and it's only fair, frankly, that it comes back to him.
Well, at the end of the day, don't you think Americans are thinking to themselves, I want a smart guy, especially a guy who says, I'm going to get rid of this tax code and the absurdity of what people have to go through to understand it and to follow it?
Well, the Trump campaign has called him a genius for doing this, but let's be honest, it's his lawyers and his accountants. So anyone with money can hire the best people to do their taxes. It's ordinary working Americans who don't have those advantages, and I think people are standing up and saying, it should be good. If it's good enough for me, Donald Trump, it's good enough for you.
Yeah, well, maybe they ought to change the tax code so they could take advantage of it. But let me ask you, David, isn't it kind of ironic that what you've got are the Democrats saying, shame on Donald Trump because he took a legal tax deduction, and they're not saying anything that she actually erased classified emails that the FBI director had to swear and say she not only lied about it, but she released and deleted our personal, I should say, public documents.
Exactly, Judge. The Clintons have decided, the Clinton campaign has decided, we have to make him look like he has used laws to his advantage just as we have, so that we're all the same. We're all in this. And the reality is she has been doing this for 30 years in government. And you point out a number of great examples. There's all the advantages she did with the Clinton Foundation, how they used that to benefit themselves. So her strategy is now is that, well, you might say he's just as bad as I am. Let's muddy this all together.
All right. And very quickly, because we got to go, another week of talking about his tax returns as opposed to the issues. Will the VP debate change it? Yes or no, Danielle?
I think it will. I think
okay.
that.
David?
I think it will.
No.
No? Okay. Good to see you both, David Avella and Danielle McLaughlin. Thanks so much. And with just 37 days until Election Day, the polls continue to show an extremely tight race. Here with more, University of Virginia professor of politics Larry Sabato joins me now. Good evening, Professor. Thanks so much for being with us. How's the crystal ball?
The crystal ball is, crowdy and cracked as it always is, but, we're making do.
All right. So she has a 3-point bump after the debate. In a volatile race like this, does it matter? Is it permanent? I mean, does the VP debate affect it?
Well, look, nobody knows whether it's permanent. You get a bump up after something good happens. She got a big bump up after the Democratic convention. As you know, it all faded. It took a while, but it all went away, and we were in a tied race. And then the first debate was judged by the polls that I saw as being favorable to Clinton, and she got a 3 or 4 point bump out of it. Although we haven't seen a lot of polls yet. In fact, the Fox poll was the only good national poll that I've seen. That came out Friday, so we'll see. Right. We have some background polls, state polls.
All right, and what we're looking at, Hillary Clinton in a two-way race beats him, and Hillary Clinton in the four-way race beats him as well. But let's talk about the fact that we've got this very unusual kind of sense of the electorate where they're like, you know what, I'm going to vote against that person as opposed to voting for my person. And so it's almost like it's not pro-candidate, it's anti the other guy.
That's absolutely true. I think it was one of the Fox polls that showed 57% of American voters were saying they're not really going to the polls so much to vote for a candidate. They're voting against somebody they really don't want to become president. It's a phenomenon called negative partisanship. And frankly, Judge, we have such a deeply polarized electorate right now that is the way it's going to be for the time being. This election and maybe some future elections as well.
All right. The recent comments that Hillary Clinton made about the basement dwellers, the millennials, and the fact that, they want free college tuition and it's a false promise. Millennials could be the turning group or the group that turns this election, yes?
Well, they actually are a larger percentage of the vote than many people think if they turn out. And it's pretty clear that, at least to this point, Clinton has not been drawing nearly as strongly as Obama did twice. He got between 60 and 66% of the millennials in his two elections. So Clinton has a long way to go. Those comments won't help her. What is helping her is Bernie Sanders is out there defending her. So we'll have to see which one dominates in the end.
All right. You know what the numbers are as it relates to the tax return release. Most people aren't bothered by it, although I don't know what was it, 49% cared about it, 42, whatever it was. Does this muddy up those waters? Do people say, now I really want to see them?
Yes, supporters of Hillary Clinton and maybe some of the third-party people. Judge, there's one thing we've learned about the Trump campaign. Nothing he does is going to cost him a voter. Remember when he said, I could go out on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any backing? Truer words were never spoken this year. So it's not going to cost him a vote. What it may do is help Clinton to excite parts of the Democratic coalition that haven't been very excited about her and maybe draw a few undecideds to her. We'll see how it plays out.
And as it relates to women, very quickly, Professor, is she moving the needle at all regarding women voters?
Well, we have, at least so far, you never know about Election Day, but to this point, we have the largest gender gap ever recorded in a presidential race. That is, women are wildly disproportionately supporting Clinton, and men are wildly disproportionately supporting Trump. I've said for years, men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and once again, we're proving it.
All right. Professor Larry Sabato, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Judge. Always enjoy it.
And policing in America still ahead. I'll get to the bottom of the stop and frisk issue that's back in the news after the presidential debate. And next, speaking of debates, veteran Republican operative Brad Blakeman is standing by to preview the vice presidential showdown. I'll tell you why I think this could be the most important vice presidential debate in this country's history. Don't miss it. Justice rolls on in a moment. We're less than 48 hours away from the vice presidential debate showdown between Mike Pence and Tim Kaine. What effect will it have on the race as Trump and Clinton continue to campaign hard and battle for those swing states? Let's ask former Deputy Assistant to President G.W. Bush, Republican strategist Brad Blakeman. All right, Brad, for the first time, we're going to have Americans voting for presidential candidates. One, Hillary Clinton, 69, and the other, Donald Trump, 70, when they go to vote. So is this debate between the vice presidential candidates significantly more important given the advanced age of the presidential candidates?
I think you're absolutely spot on. Sure it is, because the American people have to see that the people who are representing the second spot can move up to the first spot if, in fact, they are called upon to do it. So the first test of a vice presidential nominee is, can you be president? And the second test is, can you defend the number one? And that's really their main job, because when they're the vice president, that's exactly what they're called upon to do, is to go out and sell policy.
Right. Now, we saw that Hillary baited Donald in that debate. Is Kaine going to bait Mike Pence on a social issue that doesn't seem to be that big, right now in terms of the election itself? The fact that he is pro-life and that he is against gay marriage. How's he going to handle that?
I think he won't take the bait. Mike Pence is a seasoned politician. He is not going to go there. And if anything, he's going to say, hey, look, we've been through this already. I appeared before the convention. I accepted the platform. I accepted my party's nominee, and I'm his number two. I'm his partner. And while we may not agree on everything, we certainly agree on the main issues that are going to turn this election, and that is the safety of Americans, the economy, and jobs, and debt, and immigration, military, everything that goes with that. He's more in line with Donald Trump than he is apart.
Okay, and, the two of them have very similar, backgrounds, both governors. I mean, who has the edge here? And does it matter?
I think Mike Pence has the edge because of the length, breadth, and scope of his experience, not only with Congress, but running a state, an entire state, as big and as diverse as Indiana. Now, and remember, Kaine had one term because it's a one-term governorship in Virginia, and that isn't the case in Indiana. So I think the experience that Pence has is certainly a lot better as far as profile and resume than Kaine.
All right, and let's talk about the next presidential debate after the VP debate. And it's going to be a different setting than the first debate with Lester Holt asking the questions. It's a town hall. What does that mean in terms of preparation? And who do you think is going to do better, Trump or Clinton?
Well, I think the outsider, in this case Donald Trump, has the ability to excel because people don't trust Hillary Clinton. They don't trust the insider. And by the way, no party knows what the questions are going to be. The individuals are going to stand up. The test at a town hall is connecting with the questioner, giving empathy to their question, giving detail to their question, satisfying them. And if he's able to satisfy that person, it's a microcosm of people who are watching on TV. Connection is the main, but also you can attack your opponent through the question, but you can't not answer the question in a town hall.
Okay, but Brad, who picks the questions?
Well, that's a great question, and from what I understand is it's culled through the two moderators, and they're going to pick the questions. And hopefully, unlike Lester Holt, who was the third participant in the debate, this will be a fair and balanced group of questions that will cover the scope of where we know this election will be decided, and that's basically on the economy.
All right. I think that one's going to be fascinating. Brad Blakeman, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Pleasure.
All right. It's the stinging political commentary that has America talking this weekend. I'll show it to you next, and I'll bet you're going to love it. And then
I believe that the candidates need to do a better job at trying to gain the trust of the people of my age group, essentially because we're not really sure what's going to happen within the next 10, 15 years.
Okay, so why aren't you voting for Donald Trump? Coming up.
Live from America's News Headquarters, I'm Kelly Wright. Good evening. Here's what's happening. Powerful Hurricane Matthew is moving closer to Haiti. It's on course to reach the Caribbean country tomorrow before making its way to Cuba on Tuesday. Authorities warn that the Category 4 storm could cause flooding and landslides. Officials in Haiti are preparing. So far, they have set up more than 1,000 emergency shelters. Matthew is one of the strongest Atlantic hurricanes we've seen in years. And civil war rages on in Aleppo, Syria, after a ceasefire failed last month. Government forces there clashing with rebel troops in and around the city today. Now the United Nations is offering to help as the humanitarian crisis there deepens. The UN says hospitals are being wiped out. The European Union is offering more than $25 million in emergency aid. And that's a look at news. I'm Kelly, right back to Justice with Judge.
And if you missed my opening statement last night, shame on you. But luckily, we're going to give you another chance right now. Take a look. And now to my open. The presidential election in 38 days now comes down to the battle of political corruption versus truth, where one candidate chooses political correctness, the other brave enough to state the obvious. One says things not politically correct, not run through the prism of the contemporary political lens. The other says things that are oh so perfectly politically correct, considers words carefully, filters them, and then flat out lies to our faces. All the while, anarchy on our streets, riots against the one line of defense that separates us from chaos, kids shot on playgrounds with little notice, and virtually the same number of people killed in one city, Chicago, than died in the Iraq War. And now global terrorism enters the homeland. One candidate sees the turmoil, the other says everything is great and life is beautiful, and prefers to talk about name-calling and the implicit bias that we have.
Lester, I think implicit bias is a problem for everyone, not just police. I think, unfortunately, too many of us in our great country jump to conclusions about each other. And therefore, I think we need all of us to be asking hard questions about, why am I feeling this way?
Isn't that nice? It's not so implicit, Hillary, when you call tens of millions of Americans who disagree with you every name in the book. You call us deplorable, and you tell us we are not America. Who then is America, Hillary? The people you're bringing in from other parts of the world? But no, you're worried about Donald Trump's name-calling 20 years ago. Now, you asked yourselves, folks, what's that got to do with anything? And you compare that to a Secretary of State who lies to us over and over, plays fast and loose with our nation's highest secrets, drones and satellite locations, for which others, not so powerful and connected, are prosecuted. What's more offensive, words or actions? A woman who ensures no one finds out what's going on in our State Department, who along with her cabal are wheeling and dealing between the State Department and her so-called charitable foundation, and when caught, evidence is destroyed with hammers and bleach pit. A woman who runs the State Department like a private piggy bank, missing $6 billion during her tenure. You tell me what's worse, name-calling or lying to grieving parents as their sons' bodies lay cold in caskets at Air Force Base, at Andrews Air Force Base, and then turning around and calling those very same parents liars. Like your husband, Hillary, impeached for lying, perjury, and obstruction of justice, you do it with arrogance and righteous indignation. And although he may be impolitic, and while I am not a fan of things he said 20 years ago about a woman under a contractual obligation to maintain her appearance, your history with women is all about destroying them. When you represented a pedophile who raped a 12-year-old girl, raped her into a coma for 5 days, her reproductive organs destroyed, you not only laughed when your pedophile client passed a lie detector, but you trashed an innocent sixth grader, a victim, saying with no factual basis she sought out men like her rapist and she was mentally unstable. And you're offended by Donald Trump's words, but when presented with the atrocities of a group called Boko Haram by the CIA and the FBI, you refuse to take action against them and label them terrorists, a group that's killed 2,000 people and now straps explosives to little girls. Might your relationship with your friend, Gilbert Chaugary, a convicted Nigerian land developer who gave tens of millions to you and your foundation and global initiative, be the reason? The way you, Hillary, and your progressives fight terrorism is with a hashtag, Bring Back Our Girls. You don't support women, you destroy them. Whether it's all the women who accused your husband of serial marital infidelities, sexual harassment, or, yes, rape. Instead of protecting that 12-year-old, protecting a college intern, protecting a woman who claimed to be raped, your job, ruin them. Destroy any woman who gets in the way of your ambition. None of it the predator's fault. The war room created to assault the right wing, the crazy women desperate for attention, who wanted publicity, like Jennifer Flowers, who you said you'd like to crucify. You called her trailer trash. And Monica Lewinsky, you called her a narcissistic Looney Tune. Until we found your husband's semen on her dress. And Juanita Broderick, who says you threatened her. And I don't know what you said about Paula Jones, but you and your husband had to pay her $850,000 for your husband's sexual misdeeds. And you call them all bimbos. She's gaming you, folks. She takes money from countries who stone women for adultery to death. They kill them. They throw gays out of buildings. They kill them. This is a woman who's corrupted the State Department, the Department of Justice, and now, I am ashamed to admit it, the honored tradition of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. What's important, folks, are not words. What's important are actions. What's important is how one candidate has chosen to lie about issues that involve the government of the greatest nation on earth. One candidate who has chosen to lie about how she conducts the business of the United States of America, our business, the people's business, the governance of our nation. And now that you know what she is capable of, what's more important to you, political correctness or the truth? And that's my open. So which candidate is right when it comes to policing and stop and frisk? We're going to be talking about that. And next, Donald Trump and those millennials. How does he win them over? Back in a moment.
Every 15 minutes, Fox News headlines 24/7, Channel 115.
Developing tonight, new calls from Donald Trump for Bernie Sanders to pull his endorsement of Hillary Clinton. This after leaked audio of Hillary Clinton was released from back in February of this year, where she talked negatively about Sanders supporters. Take a listen to a portion of that audio. This is Hillary talking about millennials who were then supporting Sanders because they like free tuition and free health care.
They're children of the Great Recession. and they are living in their parents' basement. The idea that maybe, just maybe, you could be part of a political revolution is pretty appealing. It's a false promise. But I don't think you tell idealistic people, particularly young people, that they bought into a false promise.
Joining me now with reaction, Democratic strategist, Trump supporter, and a millennial himself, Harlan Hill. All right, good evening, Harlan. All right, so here we've got Hillary Clinton, this leaked audio. There's just a deep desire to believe, that we can have free college, free health care. It's a false promise. But I don't think you tell idealistic people, particularly young people, that they bought into a false promise. How do millennials see that?
Well, one, if it's a false promise, why is she promising it now? No, seriously, ask yourself that. And I think that just demonstrates that she's willing to say and do anything to get elected. She doesn't believe this. It's just like with TPP. She has backtracked and been on so many sides of different issues. I don't know where she really stands.
Okay, so if I'm a millennial, and there are 83 million of them in this country, and she's calling me a basement dweller and saying, that you're stupid to believe this stuff, where's my loyalty now?
Well, to an extent, she's right. Too many of my fellow millennials are living at home, and it's because they are victims of Obamanomics, economic policy that she promises to continue. I mean, it's stagnant economic growth. We're graduating from college with enormous debt, no job prospects. So she's right to an extent. Too many of us have been left behind by this economy, but it's ridiculous to think that her solutions are going to fix anything.
Okay, but then doesn't that move them toward Donald Trump? Because in terms of the economy, he always beats her on that issue.
If it weren't for the media, I'd say so. But they have been so successful in characterizing him or mischaracterizing him as a racist and misogynist. And if you know Donald Trump, if you've ever met him or if you've been following him for years, you know that that's not him. You know that that's not him.
Okay, so these millennials, basement dwellers, as she refers to them, how do you get them interested in this campaign? Are they even going to come out and vote?
I don't think so. I think that most millennials will stay home. A certain percentage of them will come out, but that would spell trouble for Hillary Clinton. Look, millennials, African Americans, they were really important. They were essential to the Obama coalition and his victories in 2008 and 2012. If they don't turn out for her this year, she cannot win, in my opinion.
All right. You know what's interesting about that, Harlan, when you say that is, according to a Fox poll, 9 out of 10 Romney voters are with Trump, but only 8 out of 10 Obama voters are with Hillary.
Absolutely.
So she's not even doing as well with her base, and Trump is even doing better.
Absolutely. And you know what? I'm convinced. I'm among a lot of silent Democrats. For a while I was silent because I was afraid of the blowback from declaring the fact that I'm a Democrat that supports Donald Trump. A lot of people are closeted. And I know of other Democratic consultants just like me that are not willing to risk their career and their friends to support Donald Trump. But they will do it when they vote on Election Day.
All right. And with the VP debate, does that impact anything?
I don't know. I mean, what I'm looking for is, I think that Governor Pence has been really professional up until this point. I mean, he's just a class act. I think that he'll do great in the debate on Tuesday.
Okay. And look, we hear about the Fox News poll in the 4-way race. Hillary beats Donald, and in a 2-way race, Hillary beats Donald. It's got to be the 4-way race at this point because it's not like Gary Johnson and Jill Stein can drop out.
Oh, no way. I mean, they're both going to stay in. And look, and that's at the expense of Hillary Clinton. If they were to drop out, I'm convinced that she would overperform. But in a 4-way race, Jill Stein, I spoke to hundreds of them outside the debate. Those are people that would have otherwise been in her column. And they're not. Jill's pulling them over.
So Jill Stein hurts Hillary.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Harlan Hill, always great to
see you.
have
It really
you.
is.
Thank you. All right. Stop and frisk becomes a topic in the race for president. That's next. Law and order policing. Issues that have always been a part of my job as DA and a judge. But they're now becoming huge in the presidential election. Specifically, Donald Trump's comments on stop and frisk, which he says is not unconstitutional. Joining me now is radio host and author of The Big Black Lie, Kevin Jackson. He's also a Fox News contributor. All right, Kevin, you and I both know that there is a United States Supreme Court case called Terry versus Ohio that says stop and frisk is constitutional. And yet we've got Lester Holt and Hillary saying that it's not. And Donald, who's not a lawyer, is saying that it is constitutional. You tell us what's the truth.
Well, of course. Well, Donald Trump did his homework. He's right. Lester Holt was trying to run to Hillary's defense. And in fact, he set up a T-ball for Hillary to knock it out of the park. But not so much that, but for Donald to look bad with blacks by wanting stop and frisk. The fact of the matter is stopping frisk does save lives. There's no doubt about that. Hillary Clinton acts as if she cares about black people. She meets with Black Lives Matter. She goes to black churches and pretend that she cares. But when it comes to a real policy that actually does save lives on the street, then suddenly she's looking at the Constitution. The fact of the matter is, it was a T-ball question for her.
All right, and the truth is that as it relates to stop and frisk, it's not so much that it is unconstitutional, because it is constitutional. Terry versus Ohio has not been overturned in any way, shape, or form, but it's in the implementation that if someone, for example, in a search warrant implementation, if you don't do it right, the results of the warrant, if you don't execute it right, then you don't get the evidence in. But they made it sound like, this is a racist issue and the cops are going after
That's where I was
blacks.
headed. Right, that's where I was headed. The idea of stop and frisk being racial, see, that's a problem, Judge. When we start looking at things in terms of how many blacks have been implicated with stop and frisk, how many whites, how many Latinos, how many Asians, the fact of the matter is stop and frisk applies to everybody. And it has to do with a police officer who's been trained to look at something that is a little bit quirky or out of the ordinary, and he or she goes after something that generates suspicion, and they then stop the person. The reason why it's being implemented so much, as the left would call it disproportionately, is because there's a disproportionate amount of criminality in the black community. Blacks don't like to hear this, but the fact is, you see a 13-year-old kid on the street on the south side or the west side of Chicago, let me save you some time, folks. That child is probably armed. Don't think of him as a kid. Don't think of him as a little teenager that's headed to college or whatever in 10 years or whatever number of time. That is a kid that will kill you for no reason. And it isn't that blacks are more likely to do that, Judge. It is a circumstance set up by the left that have led these kids into hopeless situations.
All right. What about when Donald Trump uses the phrase law and order? I've heard, several Democrat pundits say that's a dog whistle. I mean, that's what I did for 30 years. I was kind of proud of it. And now it's a dog whistle to racism to say law and order?
Everything's a dog whistle these days, because that's the political correctness says don't say anything that we find offensive. Law and order is not offensive. Law and order is what we all crave. Look, law and order is generated more in the black community disproportionately in a good way than in any other community. So the idea that it's racist is ridiculous. Cops.
All right. Kevin Jackson, thanks so much for being with us. Little problem there. We'll be right back. It's the battle in Virginia. Tune in Tuesday, all day on the Fox News Channel for coverage up to and including the vice presidential debate between Democratic vice presidential nominee Tim Kaine and Republican VP nominee Mike Pence. It's live, wall-to-wall coverage all day Tuesday. Keep it here on Fox. And that'll do it for us tonight. Remember, friend me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Judge_Jeanine. We're back live next Saturday night, and I will be coming to you from St. Louis, the site of the next presidential debate. Thanks so much for being here tonight and watching. See you next week.